There's a version of this story that claims a Sumerian tablet describes a coordinated, global mining operation run by the Anunnaki, supervised by Nephilim hybrids bred for the job, targeting a mysterious substance hidden beneath gold deposits on 3 continents, all guarded by ancient sealed doors that something is still dormant behind. It weaves in real archaeologists, a real research institution, and real archaeological sites more heavily than almost anything else we've covered in this series. So let's be precise about where the real history ends and the invention begins. Here's what's real. Austin Henry Layard genuinely excavated Nineveh and sent a huge number of real tablets to the British Museum. That part of the setup is accurate history. The Chicago Assyrian Dictionary is also completely real. A genuine, decades-long, massively respected lexicographic project by the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago, cataloging Akkadian vocabulary. Klaus Schmidt was a real, highly respected archaeologist who did excavate Göbekli Tepe starting in 1994, and that site really is roughly 11 to 12,000 years old. Genuinely remarkable, and genuinely important to how archaeologists understand the transition to settled civilization. Now here's where things need direct correction, because this script uses those real names and institutions to support claims those people and institutions never made. There is no documented tablet in the British Museum's collection describing a global mining conspiracy, and no real curator, named or anonymous, has publicly or privately confirmed a sensitive collection of suppressed tablets. This is the same unverifiable by design pattern we've flagged throughout this series, just built around real institutions instead of invented ones this time, which makes it worth naming even more clearly, attaching an invented claim to a real, respected research project like the Chicago Assyrian Dictionary risks, implying that project's real scholars support a conclusion they've never been associated with. Zecharia Sitchin is a real person, and it's worth restating something we've covered elsewhere in this series. Sitchin was a real 20th century writer who argued the Anunnaki were literal extraterrestrials, based on his own translations of Sumerian and Akkadian texts. Professional Assyriologists who've reviewed those translations have found them not supported by the actual grammar and vocabulary of the source texts. That's not mainstream academia being closed-minded. It's the ordinary, well-documented outcome of language specialists checking translation work against the real language, presenting Sitchin's reading as reaching a conclusion, impossible to explain by conventional means, skips over the fact that conventional Assyriology has, in fact, explained why his readings don't hold up. Here's a specific and important correction. The claim that Göbekli Tepe has been closed off from further excavation due to government suppression is not accurate, and it's worth being direct about this because it's checkable. Göbekli Tepe has been the subject of extensive, ongoing, internationally collaborative excavation for 3 decades, was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2018, and has seen major investment in tourism infrastructure and public access, specifically because Turkey and the international archaeological community consider it one of the most important sites in the world. That's the opposite of suppression, and it's worth correcting plainly rather than letting the claims stand. Adrian Bashir and Michael Tellinger are both real people. Bashir did real fieldwork investigating ancient mining evidence in southern Africa. Tellinger is a real author who has promoted claims about vast ancient stone ruin networks and extremely old mining sites in the region, including the specific claims repeated here about shafts dated to around 100,000 years and mechanically precise cutting. These specific claims are not accepted by mainstream archaeology or geology. Professional archaeological dating of southern African mining activity places it many thousands of years later than claimed here, and there's no accepted geological evidence of the mechanical or thermal cutting techniques described. Tellinger's work is genuinely popular but exists outside and is not endorsed by the mainstream archaeological community studying the region. The claim about a submerged settlement beneath the Persian Gulf does have a real, legitimate scientific basis worth crediting accurately. Archaeologist Jeffrey Rose published real research in 2010 proposing that the Persian Gulf basin was dry, habitable land, sometimes called the Gulf Oasis hypothesis, before rising sea levels submerged it roughly 8,000 years ago. That's real, serious, published science. What isn't supported is the specific claim that satellite imagery has confirmed an ancient settlement tied to a Sumerian tablet's mining coordinates. That's an invented extension layered onto a real hypothesis. The Skyfallen stone and monatomic gold, described here, draws on a real fringe concept, sometimes called ORMs or orbitally rearranged monatomic elements, that has circulated in alternative wellness and New Age communities since the 1990s, but has no basis in accepted chemistry or physics. It's worth naming this plainly as pseudoscience rather than an open scientific question. I want to restate something directly connected to a point made earlier in this series, since the Nephilim are back at the center of the story. In Islamic belief, angels do not disobey Allah. A narrative describing angelic or semi-divine beings interbreeding with humans to produce a hybrid supervisory class isn't a framework Islamic cosmology recognizes, and it's worth being clear that entertaining this as historical fact runs against that basic point of Islamic belief, not just against mainstream archaeology. And as in earlier scripts in this series, the claim that a population figure, 8 billion, was calculated in advance as a trigger condition deserves the same direct treatment. There's no real basis for treating any ancient number as a working prediction of a present-day threshold, and repeating it, even while noting this doesn't prove anything, still does the work of implying urgency without evidence. So where does that leave us? With real archaeologists, a real research institution, and real, important archaeological sites, Nineveh, Göbekli Tepe, the Chicago Assyrian Dictionary, accurately named but wrapped around an entirely invented tablet, a mischaracterized account of Sitchin's rejected translations, a false claim of government suppression at one of the world's most publicly excavated sites, and fringe pseudo-archaeological and pseudoscientific claims presented as though they were accepted findings. If this kind of thread interests you, the real story of Göbekli Tepe and the real Gulf Oasis hypothesis about the submerged Persian Gulf basin are both genuinely fascinating on their own terms. Real science, openly published, worth reading directly rather than through an invented mining conspiracy layered on top. Real archaeology doesn't need to borrow real names to make an invented story feel credible. Nineveh, Göbekli Tepe, and the scholars who've spent careers on them are remarkable enough as they actually are.